I want to begin by just reading a passage of the story of the birth of Jesus, different than the one that Nathan read just a moment ago. And it's one that we've actually been grounded in the last several weeks. If you're a part of Summit and you're here on a regular basis, you know we've been looking at the birth of Jesus and some specific things around his birth for the past few weeks. But I want to just read this passage that we've been anchored in. Matthew chapter 1, beginning in verse 18, it says this. It says, "This is how Jesus the Messiah was born. His mother Mary was engaged to be married to Joseph, but before the marriage took place, while she was still a virgin, she became pregnant through the power of the Holy Spirit. Joseph, to whom she was engaged, was a righteous man and did not want to disgrace her publicly, so he decided to break the engagement quietly. As he considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, 'Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child within her was conceived by the Holy Spirit. And she'll have a son, and you're to call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins.'" And Matthew continues and he says, "All of this occurred to fulfill the Lord's message through his prophet," speaking of the Old Testament. "Look, the virgin will conceive a child, she will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel," which means God with us. The past few weeks we've been talking about this idea of Emmanuel, this proclamation that's being made in Matthew about God now being with us. And if you've been here, you know that we've talked about just the amazing reality that the God of the universe, what we're being told, the God of all creation, the God who was and is to come, is actually with us. And we talk about God being with us. We're not simply saying that God is present, but we're also saying that God is for us, that he's on our side, that he's here to be with us in a powerful, meaningful sort of way, that God is for us. And when we talk about us, we're not talking about a generic term or reference to just humanity in general. What we're referring to is us, like us, you and I. And so we're the places that we go where we work, or the places where we educate ourselves, or the neighborhoods that we live in, or the friends that we hang out with. No matter where we are, very specifically, the God of the universe is with us wherever we're going. For the past several weeks, we've been talking about the implications of this. We've been talking about what that means and how that's fleshed out and how we experience God in those ways. But tonight, on this very specific and special night, I want to talk about the moment that Emmanuel proclamation becomes a reality. I want to talk about the moment in which this actually happens, when God is with us. Theologians have a term for this. They describe this with a word that's, it's the word incarnation. Would you just say that with me? Say incarnation. Incarnation is this word that theologians, it's a big word to say, this is this moment when something significant happened. When Emmanuel becomes reality, it is this thing called the incarnation. Now, incarnation is a really interesting word because it's taken from the Latin. And the Latin language, the word incarno is a verb, and literally it means to make flesh, to make skin. Like carno in the Latin language is the word for skin, and then incarno is this verb to make skin. And so the word incarnation, the word we use to describe this moment, is this word of flesh making. We're making flesh, which sounds kind of odd and kind of unusual when you think about it. So what is being made into flesh? What is this flesh making moment really all about? It's interesting because if you turn over to one of the other biographies of Jesus, the Gospel of John, the Apostle John wrote a similar narrative to the one that Matthew wrote, but it starts a little differently than Matthew's. And if you look at the Gospel of John in this biography, he begins in a very interesting way, and I just want you to hear the way he starts. In fact, verse 1 of his biography and verse 14 go together in a very interesting way, and I want you to listen. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And then a few verses later, he says about this Word, he says, "The Word became flesh." The Word was incarnated, experienced this incarno. There was a flesh-making moment, and he made his dwelling among us. So in the beginning. Now, what's interesting about John's letter is that when this was written and it was distributed to various people, when the early church was just starting in the first century, the vast majority of people who were making up this first church were people who were part of Judaism. And so as a member of Judaism, anybody growing up in that culture, they would have gone to Hebrew school and they would have studied at length the Old Testament. They would have known all of the stories, and certainly even if they didn't pass their classes, they would have been familiar with how the whole thing begins. The book of Genesis starts in a way that's incredibly similar to the way that John starts. Genesis says, In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There's this reference to in the beginning. It's a description of a particular time or place where there was no time, right? It's this place where we didn't exist yet, but God did. It's in the beginning. There's this reality that was outside of the space and time we may be in right now. So then John writes his letter and he says, in the beginning was the Word. Let me just tell you, this wasn't an accident on John's part. This wasn't like at some point, like he wrote this and somebody came up and they said, hey, did you realize that you started your letter the same way Moses started Genesis? He's like, no, I didn't even realize. A total coincidence. No, he does it on purpose, and he does it because he wants to talk about the same time frame. What he's trying to do is describe what's happening in the biography of Jesus to begin this story at the very beginning. And so he says, I want to locate what I'm talking about in the same moment that Moses was talking about. In the beginning. All the way back there. So the biography of Jesus, from John's perspective, doesn't start at the birth of Jesus. It starts all the way back in the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, this idea of the Word, this isn't just a vocabulary word. The Word is an entity. The Word is a personality. So in the beginning, all the way back there was this entity, there was this personality. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then, John fast forwards, and by verse 14, he says, then the Word, at some point in history, at some time in history, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. The Word became flesh, the incarnation. There's this moment in which the Word becomes flesh and moves into the neighborhood with us, moves in to rub shoulders with humanity. There's a moment in time when everything changes, and when God becomes flesh, when the Word becomes flesh, human history is never the same. Everything changes because of this moment. Now, for the past couple of weeks, I've been thinking about this a little bit more than probably most people because I have to speak on Christmas Eve. So I've been thinking about this reality of, this idea that John's presenting, that there's this moment in the beginning, and then there's this moment over here where the Word becomes flesh. There's these two distinct moments, and I found myself just sort of thinking differently, and maybe even thinking cosmically about the time between in the beginning and when the Word became flesh. I started thinking about the things that might have been happening or the things that might have been going on during this period of time, and I found myself imagining a sort of conversation that might have taken place between the Father and the Son, between God and the pre-incarnate Christ. I just sort of imagined this, and maybe you can imagine this with me, that one day, he comes to the Son and he says, hey, can we talk? And the Son, being the perfect Son, says, well, of course we can. I can't say no because I'm a perfect Son, right? So he says, listen, I've been paying attention. I've been looking down at humanity, and I've been seeing that humanity is in pretty dire straits. I've been looking at their condition. I see the darkness, and I see the coldness of the world, and as much as we try to get through to them, there just doesn't seem to be a way. And so one of us is going to have to go among them. One of us is going to have to be with them. One of us, in order for them to be the people we created them to be, in order for them to live the life that we wanted them to live, one of us is going to have to enter into the world that they're living in and speak the language that they're speaking so that they can see us for who we really are. And by the way, that's not going to be me. How about if it's you? And I've got a plan. And you can kind of imagine, he begins to present the plan. He says, okay, so here's the deal. There's this girl, Mary. And you're going to love her. She's great. She's not like other girls. She doesn't play spin the bottle and do all the stuff that other girls do. She's just a really sweet, innocent girl, right? She lives in Nazareth. She's amazing. She's going to be your mom. I'll get to that later, but she's going to be your mom. And then there's this guy named Joseph, and he's going to be your father on the earth. He's not going to get a lot of press the rest of history. There's just sort of this one moment where he's really famous, and then we don't really hear much from him, but he's a pretty decent carpenter. He's going to show you a few things, okay? So here's the deal. You got Mary and you got Joseph, and just so we're clear, you are not going to be dropped on their doorstep by a stork. You are going to enter the cold, dark world the same way every other human being enters the cold, dark world. Mary is going to push you out into it. And you will be, even though you are God, you will be fully human. You will live the human experience. You will experience what it feels like to be a human being. Now, here's the really cool part about this. I got this idea about how we'll do this, how you'll enter in. A lot of people, if they heard we were doing this, they would expect you to show up in a palace. They would expect you to show up someplace where there was feasting and where there were musicians and where there was all sorts of celebration, and all of the cultural elites and the wealthy people would be gathering around because that would just make sense to them. But we're going to throw a wrinkle in their thinking. How about if you're born in some sort of like cave with a bunch of animals in a really obscure place? You can imagine the Christ looking and saying, yes, like this is perfect. Like if I'm born that way, then everybody will know that I've come for the ordinary. Then everyone will understand I've come for the average person, not for the elites. Absolutely, I love this idea. So he continues on. He goes, okay, now you got to understand, from the moment you're born, there's going to be some trouble. There are going to be people who hate you because of what you're doing, because of what we're accomplishing. There will be those that come against you. In fact, before you're even able to walk, there's going to be people who want you dead. And your family's going to have to flee. But the good news is you're going to. You're going to flee to Egypt for a while. Then you're going to come back. And then you're going to have a pretty normal childhood. You're going to kind of grow up as a kid. Here's the deal. I got to give you some advice before we go any further. There's going to be moments when your mom wants you to eat broccoli. Don't turn it into chocolate. Just eat the broccoli, right? There are going to be times you don't want to take a bath. Do not part the bath waters. Just take the bath. And when you get to school, your classmates are going to hate you if you're a perfectionist. So intentionally miss some questions every now and then. Just don't be a perfectionist in school. Nobody likes a brown-noser Jesus. So just like kind of play it cool. You know what I'm saying? Like miss a few test questions along the way. Control your power. Because here's the deal. Eventually they're going to know who you are. In fact, how about this? How about if we just like open things up and they discover who you are? It's just a sort of party trick. How about if the first time you show your power, you turn water into wine? That will really mess with religious people. Like I can just imagine for centuries people arguing about whether or not you actually turned it into real wine or whether it was grape juice or whatever it was. But let's just mess with them. Let's just like blow their categories of who we are. Let's just show them something about what we're all about. And then from there it's going to continue. Then you're going to help blind people see, and there'll be deaf people that hear, and there'll be lame people that walk. You're even going to raise people from the dead. And people are going to love you. Not everybody, though. There are going to be some people that hate you. In fact, there's going to be some people that in the middle of all of this excitement and enthusiasm, they're going to be people that call you a drunkard, a friend of sinners. They're going to be people that call you a heretic. They're going to call you a lunatic. They're going to tell other people that you're dangerous. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to just keep on loving. I want you to keep loving them. I want you to keep doing that because that's who we are. I want you to touch the untouchables. I want you to find the lepers that have been cast out, and I want you to put their hands on them and let them feel a human touch for the first time in years. I want you to find the prostitutes who have been rejected by their families and friends, and I want you to welcome them back into the family of God. I want you to discover those people who feel like misfits and help them find their fit. Find the unloved and love them. Find the unaccepted and accept them. Bring them in because that's who we are. We are love, and let's show them that. Let's show them our love. And then you're going to need some friends. So why don't you get like 12 people together? 12 guys and invest in them. In fact, this is going to work. You invest in 12 guys, they're going to stick with you. They might do some stupid stuff up front, but for the long haul, they're going to do pretty good. They're going to be loyal. They're going to live their lives for you. So invest in these individuals. But here's the hard part. And here's the part I need you to hear about this. If we are going to do away with religiosity and legalism, if we are going to break the stranglehold that sin has on people's lives, if we're going to open up people's eyes and their hearts to who we really are, if that's what we're going to do, things are going to have to get worse before they get better. And so one of those friends that you develop is going to betray you. He's going to betray you, and then shortly after that moment, you're going to be able to see things kind of as you see them right now. You're going to see them cosmically, and there is going to be this moment of realization where you see what's happening in front of you. You see where things are about to go, and then you're going to plead with me. You're going to come to me, you're going to say, listen, is there any other way? Is there something we can do to avoid this? And you're going to cry out to me, and you're going to say, can this cup pass from me? Do I have to drink this? Do I have to do this? You're going to beg of me. And then in the middle of this moment, when you are pleading with me for us to come up with another way, you're going to be arrested. You're going to be falsely accused. You're going to be falsely charged, and you're going to be arrested. And then you're going to be beaten. Then you're going to be mocked. And then you're going to be put on a cross. And you're going to suffer. In fact, there's going to be a moment of suffering that is so profound and so acute and so overwhelming that it will cause you to forget all of the time and eternity that you and I have had together. It will cause you to believe in that moment that I've turned my back on you. It'll cause you to think that I've forgotten about you. It will be that painful and that difficult. And then you're going to die. That's not the end of the story. 3 days later, you're going to rise up. 3 days later, you are going to change human history forever. Your friends are going to come to care for your body. They're going to open the tomb. You're not going to be there. They're going to discover that you've risen, and literally human history is going to change and will never be the same because of this moment. Like, it will never be the same because you will be risen from the dead. You're going to overcome death. You're going to overcome sin. It's this beautiful thing. Then you're going to spend some time talking to your disciples, and then right before you go, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to them, and I want you to gather all the ones that are really serious and really get it, and I want you to tell them. Just say, listen, go into all of the world. Go everywhere. Go to every village, every country, every language, every neighborhood, and tell people about us. Tell people about the gospel. Tell them about the grace of God. Tell them about the love of God. And baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Just tell them all. And then right before you go, I want you to say this. I want you to say the very thing that we said when you showed up. Look at them and say, and I will be with you always, even until the end of the age. Can you do that? Are you up for this? I know it sounds crazy, but can you do this? This week, I just imagined the son looking at the father and saying, I have to. They're sheep without a shepherd. They're patients without a doctor. I want to give them life and life to the full. Of course I'll say yes to this. Of course I'll say yes. Of course I'll do this. And so when we read in Matthew chapter 1 that she will have a son and you're to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. When we read those words, we are reading the decision that was made for the Christ to come and enter into this plan. The celebration of Christmas is the celebration of the Word becoming flesh. It's the celebration of God saying, I want to be with you. I don't want you to be alone. It's the celebration that before time was time, the Word was with God and the Word was God. And then the Word made a choice. The Word made a decision to be incarnated, a flesh-making moment that would change history and move into our lives. And why does Matthew say he does this? To rescue us. To rescue us. So that when we're alone, we have a companion. So that when we're sick, we have a healer. So that when we're weak, we have someone to strengthen us. So that when we're lost, we have a guide. So that when we're angry, we have somebody who will fight for us. So that when we're wrought with anxiety and worry, we have someone that will bring peace to us. That's why. Several times over the past few days, I've just found myself I've just been reminding myself, like, this whole thing was a choice that was made. You made this choice and you made this for us. And the moment that we read about this child in the womb of this virgin, there's this proclamation being made from the God of the universe saying, you are not alone. I would never leave you alone. And the most beautiful aspect of this story is that it isn't over right here. This isn't a story that we pull out, a reality that we acknowledge once a year. This isn't something that's just caught in the dusty pages of some ancient book and we just sort of open it up and remind ourselves of it. This is something that we continue to experience. This moment changes things. It's not theory, it's reality. It's my reality. It can be your reality. When Jesus says, I'll never leave you or forsake you, he actually means that. And so if you're the kind of person that you've opened your life to Jesus, the way of Jesus, if you're the kind of person who leans in and you listen for his voice, if you long for his direction in your life, my guess is that if you've done that for any length of time, you've discovered him the way that I've discovered him. You've discovered him in the valleys of life. You've discovered him in the deserts. You've discovered him when you thought you couldn't go on, when you didn't know there was another way. You've discovered him when you literally were helpless, or you were hopeless, and somehow Jesus enters into some moment and you got through it. Or maybe it's on the mountaintop. Maybe it's at the birth of a child or the gathering of friends and the laughter of community, and suddenly you have these moments and you're just grateful and you've discovered him. Whether it's the mountaintop or the valley, we experience God with us continually. Last Tuesday, I was thinking about this a lot, just this reality of us experiencing this. And I found myself just taking some time to reflect. And as I was doing that, I thought, you know what? This is what I want us to do on Christmas Eve. I just want to take a moment to reflect and to move past an event that happened 2,000 years ago and remember that God is with us today. And so I'm just going to ask you to do something that we haven't done on Christmas Eve before, but I'm just going to ask you right now, would you just close your eyes with me? Just bow your head and close your eyes. And I want you to just take a nice, calm breath right now. Just breathe in and breathe out. And I want you to consider now the last 11 and a half months, the last year basically. I want you to think about the last year. And was there a time in the last year when Jesus was faithful to get you through? Was there a moment, was there a circumstance, was there something where your back was against the wall and you didn't know what you were going to do, and you just, as you look back now, you go, actually, you know what? Jesus met me in that moment. Was there a time when you were weak? You felt like you couldn't go on. You felt like you didn't know if you were going to get to the next day, and somehow Jesus gave you the strength to get to the next day. Or was there healing that was done? Did you experience some sort of healing, and maybe in your own heart and your soul? Maybe there was forgiveness that was extended, or maybe there was the reconciliation of a relationship. Maybe there was actually something physically healed, and the only explanation for those things is that Jesus was at work. Did something like that happen in the last 11 and a half months? Was there a moment when you experienced direction or leading? Like you had choices and you didn't know what to do, and you got direction? Or were there things that were promised to you years ago, and you began to see them brought to fruition in this last year? Go ahead and open your eyes. I know when I did this last week, my year was filled with moments where I experienced Emmanuel, where I experienced God being with me. Some of them very small, some of them incredibly significant. But the truth is, that's what Jesus came for, so that in a moment like this, we could actually think of our year and remember times when this story leapt from the pages, when it leapt from December 25th, and it landed smack in the middle of our lives, and Jesus came to be with us. So every year at the end of our Christmas Eve service, we close with a candle lighting. And this is a tradition that for many of us, it's just been a tradition without a whole lot of meaning behind it. But I'm going to invite you to stand right now, and if you'll grab your candle, I want to explain why we do this. The reason that we celebrate in this particular way is that we find ourselves living in the cold darkness of the world. And Jesus enters in and he brings light. He illuminates the darkness. He brings warmth. He eradicates the coldness. He's incarnated. And in a very unique way, this is a symbol of the incarnation. Jesus coming and illuminating and warming, coming to life. And so as we receive this, I just want you to be reminded of what this means, that Jesus has come for you and for me and for all of us together. So as we share in this candle lighting, I'm just going to invite you to sing with me. We're going to sing together, Silent Night. Merry Christmas, everyone. We'll see you guys soon. Please drop your candles in the baskets. There's ciders and cookies. Enjoy your time, enjoy your friends, and we'll see you guys soon.